There is a sound the human soul longs for more than any other. The sound of chains falling, not the clang of metal striking the ground, but an invisible echo deep within the spirit, the sound that whispers, "You're free." It's that sacred moment when tears mingle with light, when fear dissolves into peace, and grace begins to speak louder than guilt. Every one of us carries chains of our own. They're not made of iron, but of memories, guilt, and the words that once cut too deep. Some are chained by their past, by mistakes they can't undo. Others are bound by fear, fear of rejection, failure, or the future. Many are imprisoned by shame, by the weight of things they've hidden for far too long. And over time, we learn to live with those chains so well that we forget what freedom feels like. Like a prisoner who has spent too many years in the dark, we sometimes stay seated even when the door swings open, because freedom feels foreign. How many times have we done the same? We pray for God to set us free, yet when He opens the door, we hesitate to walk through it. We've grown comfortable with our chains, afraid of who we might become without them. But God never created us to live as captives. He created us for freedom, for the kind of freedom that comes from being loved, forgiven, and fully known. In every heartbeat, God still whispers, "Come out, lay the chains down. You don't have to carry them anymore." Yet perhaps the hardest thing is not breaking free. It's believing we deserve to be free. Because the most dangerous chain of all is not made of sin or fear, but of a quiet voice that says, "You're not enough. You're too broken. You don't deserve grace." But grace is the answer to every lie. Grace doesn't say, "You deserve it." Grace says, "I chose you anyway." And that's where the chains begin to crack. When love grows louder than guilt, when light pierces the dark, when God's truth speaks louder than shame, no chain can remain intact. Maybe you've tried again and again to change, to do better, to break free. You've prayed, promised, repented, yet somehow always found yourself back in the same place. Deep down, perhaps you've started to believe you'll never be free. But here's the truth. Where your strength ends, His grace begins. Where you see no way out, God makes a way through. In Acts 16, Paul and Silas were locked in a prison, hands bound, doors sealed. Yet at midnight, they began to sing, and as their voices rose in worship, the ground shook, the doors opened, and every chain fell loose. That wasn't just a miracle, it was a message. The same presence that filled that cell still fills our hearts today. When God enters the prison of your soul, chains have no choice but to fall. Can you hear it? That faint, holy sound, the sound of chains falling. Maybe it's subtle, just a whisper in your heart. But that's the sound of new life, awakening. It's the sound of God touching the deepest parts of your soul, stirring hope where there was once only despair. Then you begin to realize freedom isn't a reward for the perfect, it's a gift for the surrendered. Freedom doesn't come when you're strong enough, but when you finally stop trying to save yourself and let grace do what only grace can do. The chains that held you for years begin to break, slowly, quietly, completely. Jesus didn't just open the door of your prison. He reached in to lead you out. The freedom He offers is not just escape from something, but entrance into something greater, a life overflowing with peace, purpose, and presence. And if you listen closely, you will hear it again, the sound of chains breaking, the breath of grace moving through your heart, the Spirit of God whispering, "You are free." In that moment, the old passes away, and something new begins to live inside you. Because in His presence, no chain can remain. And when He says you are free, nothing in heaven or on earth can bind you again. Part 1. The invisible chains. There are prisons you can see. Walls of stone, bars of steel, locks that shut with a sound that echoes in the dark. But there are other prisons, quieter ones, that live inside us. They have no doors, no guards, no visible keys, yet they hold the heart captive just the same. These are the invisible chains, the ones no one else can see, but you feel them every day, the weight around your chest, the silence that echoes in your thoughts, the fear that whispers, "You'll never be free." Invisible chains are the ones we carry even when we smile. They hide beneath our laughter, behind our busyness, under the armor we wear to look strong. They are made of things the world doesn't talk about. Shame, regret, resentment, insecurity, guilt. They form slowly, link by link, over years of disappointment, rejection, or sin we thought we'd buried long ago. Sometimes we don't even remember how they started. You only know that we wake up every day feeling heavy, tired, unworthy. For some, the chain is guilt. The voice that replays every mistake, every word spoken in anger, every failure that still burns in memory. For others, it's fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being hurt again, fear of not being enough for anyone, not even for God. There are chains of grief, holding us in the moment we lost something precious, chains of addiction, whispering that we'll never change, and chains of comparison, telling us that everyone else is better, happier, closer to God than we are. But perhaps the heaviest chains are those forged in silence, the kind we never tell anyone about, the things we pretend don't bother us, the wounds we cover with smiles and busyness, the doubts we hide behind perfect prayers. We convince ourselves that as long as we keep moving, no one will notice the clinking sound of chains dragging behind us. Yet deep down, the soul remembers. It remembers what freedom once felt like. It remembers the sound of laughter before the world grew heavy. It remembers innocence before guilt, courage before fear, faith before disappointment. That's why, even in our darkest moments, something in us still longs for light, because the soul knows it was not created for bondage. These invisible chains are cruel because they lie. They whisper that the prison is home, that captivity is safety, that the past defines us. They make us believe we have to earn love, perform for grace, and hide our brokenness from God. But He sees the chains even when no one else does. He sees through the smiles and the silence, through the walls we build and the masks we wear. And where others see a well-kept life, He sees wrists that bleed beneath the weight of unseen iron. One of the greatest deceptions of the enemy is to make you think you're still bound, even when the door has already been opened. To make you believe that freedom is for others, but not for you. To whisper that your past is too dirty, your heart too weak, your faith too small. But the truth of the gospel is this: Jesus doesn't ask if you deserve to be free. He declares that you are. Whom the Son sets free is free indeed. And yet, many of us live like the freed prisoners who never leave their cells. We stay because the chains feel familiar. Pain, as terrible as it is, can become a strange comfort when it's all we've known. But you cannot heal while you hold on to what hurt you. You cannot step into freedom while clutching the fragments of what broke you. Freedom begins when you dare to believe that your life can be different, not because you are strong, but because His love is. Invisible chains often tighten most when God begins to draw us closer. As light enters, darkness resists. Old wounds resurface. Memories you thought forgotten suddenly return. But this is not a sign of failure. It is a sign that healing has begun. For the chains must be seen before they can be broken. Grace does not hide what is wounded. It exposes it gently so that love can reach it. In those moments when you feel the pull of old pain, the voice of fear, the weight of shame, remember you are not fighting alone. God is not standing at a distance waiting for you to escape the prison. He has stepped inside it with you. His presence fills the cell. His light pushes against the darkness, and His voice whispers, "You are mine, you are not your past." There is something sacred about admitting you are not free, because that's where freedom begins. The walls of pride crumble, the pretense falls away, and all that's left is a soul crying, "God, I need you." And in that humble, holy moment, the first link of the chain breaks. Every tear you've shed in silence, every battle no one knows you're fighting, every night you've whispered, "Lord, please help me." He has seen it all. He has not turned away. He has not forgotten. And every time you've thought, "Maybe I'll never change," heaven has answered, "Yes, you will, because I am not done with you yet." The chains may be invisible, but the power that breaks them is not. It is the power that raised Jesus from the grave. The power that transforms weakness into strength, sorrow into praise, despair into hope. That same power lives in you, and no matter how deep the darkness, light always finds its way in. So, let the light come. Let it reach the corners of your soul you've kept hidden. Let the grace of God do what willpower never could. You don't have to pretend anymore. You don't have to carry what He already carried to the cross. You don't have to stay chained to what He already broke. Because the truth is, those invisible chains, they were never stronger than His love. They only ever had the power you gave them. And once you see that, once you believe that His presence is greater than your prison, everything begins to change. Freedom may not come with a loud sound or a sudden miracle. Sometimes it begins quietly, with a whisper, with a surrender, with a single breath that says, I can't do this alone anymore. And in that moment, the invisible chains start to loosen. The soul exhales. The heart begins to heal. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. And even if you cannot see it yet, even if you still feel the weight, remember this. The chains are already breaking. The light is already shining. Grace has already begun its work. And one day soon, you will wake up and realize that what once held you no longer has any power, that you are walking lighter, breathing easier, living freer, because the one who promised to set you free has kept His promise. In His presence, no chain, visible or invisible, can remain unbroken. Part 2. When God enters the prison. There are places within the human soul that we don't want anyone to touch, hidden chambers where fear, shame, and unhealed memories live. We lock those rooms with the key called I'm fine, hang a sign that says do not enter, and convince ourselves that if we ignore them long enough, the darkness will fade away. But darkness does not retreat on its own, and pain does not dissolve with time. It waits, quietly, patiently, until the moment we're too tired to resist, and it is precisely there, in that silent, suffocating place, that God chooses to step in. He doesn't knock softly. He doesn't wait for an invitation. He isn't afraid of the mess or the brokenness. He walks straight into the places we're most ashamed of. Because He doesn't come only when we've cleaned up our hearts. He comes to bring light into the places we've long called hopeless. He comes to prove that even in the prison, grace can still sing. When we read the story of Paul and Silas in the book of Acts, we tend to focus on the miracle, the earthquake, the prison doors flung open, the chains falling to the ground. But the real miracle began long before the earth shook. It began when two men, beaten and bound, started to sing in the dark. They didn't sing because freedom had arrived. They sang because the presence was already there. They didn't worship to escape. They worshipped because He was with them. And when their praise rose through the darkness, heaven responded, the earth trembled, and every chain broke. Because where God's presence dwells, freedom follows. That story isn't just history. It's the story of us. For not every prison is made of stone. Some are built from fear, from grief, from guilt that lingers in the corners of our hearts. Some chains don't bind our wrists. They bind our thoughts. Yet every time we worship through the pain, every time we whisper, God, I trust you when the night is long, something shifts inside us. The miracle happens quietly, not around us, but within us. When God enters your prison, He doesn't just open the door. He sits beside you. He listens to the sighs you're too weary to speak. He touches the wounds you've tried to hide. He doesn't scold you for being broken or rebuke you for being weak. He simply says, I'm here. And in those two words, something within begins to melt. The bitterness, the self-blame, the walls you've built around your heart. God doesn't break chains with a hammer. He breaks them with His presence. Wherever His light enters, darkness loses ground. Wherever His love touches, sin loses power. His presence is stronger than every chain, because where He is, life begins to flow again. Do you remember the last time you truly felt His presence? Maybe it was during a prayer, a song, or a quiet morning when tears came without warning. In that moment, He was there, not with thunder, but with a gentle whisper, not to shame you, but to love you. Not to remind you of what you've done, but to remind you that he never left. When God steps into your prison, everything outside may still look the same. But you are no longer the same. Something inside you shifts. The trembling heart grows calm. The clenched soul begins to rest. The chains around your spirit may not yet fall, but deep down you know freedom has already begun. That's what Paul and Silas experienced. Their bodies were bound, but their spirits were soaring. And once your soul is free, no wall can hold you captive. Perhaps you're living in a prison no one can see. The prison of fear, of failure, of a past that won't let go. You've tried to break free, but the harder you fight, the tighter the chains seem to grip. You've prayed, and all you've heard is silence. But remember, God's silence is never his absence. He is not waiting outside your darkness. He is standing in it with you. He doesn't wait for your strength to appear before he comes. He steps in at the very moment you collapse, because it's only when you fall that you finally look up. And when you do, you'll see him, not as a harsh judge, but as a loving father kneeling beside you, unlocking the chains with his gentle, scarred hand. Imagine it in the suffocating room of your soul. A faint light begins to slip through the cracks. Slowly, tenderly, it spreads to the corners you thought light could never reach. Each beam of light carries a message. I'm still here. I still love you. I have never forgotten you. And in that stillness, you hear it, the soft clink of metal hitting the ground, not in the world around you, but deep within your heart. The chains begin to fall, not because you fought harder, but because he came. When he enters, you don't have to understand everything. You only need to stay with him. His presence doesn't demand explanation. It invites surrender. The moment you stop trying to control, stop hiding, stop earning his favor, that's the moment grace starts working. Because grace never flows through strength. It flows through surrender. Maybe you've heard it said 1,000 times, God is with you. But today, let that truth become real. Picture him beside you right now, in the room filled with memories, in the quiet space of your pain. His eyes don't condemn, they understand. His hands don't drag you out, they open an invitation. And in that embrace, every invisible chain begins to lose its meaning. There is no prison thick enough to keep you from the presence of God. No chain strong enough to withstand the power of his love. The walls may still stand, but the soul inside them has been awakened. And once your soul awakens, nothing can confine you again. When God enters the prison, he brings more than freedom. He brings life. He doesn't just break the chains. He teaches you to dance in the very place that once held you captive. He doesn't just open the door. He walks you out to see a sunrise you never thought you'd live to see. He turns the cell into a sanctuary, the weeping into worship, the ashes into beauty. And then you'll understand, God didn't set you free just so you could live unbound. He set you free so you could become a witness of freedom, so that when others look at you, they'll see something the world can't give and the darkness can't steal. The peace of a soul that has been visited by God himself. The prison may still exist, but the chains no longer hold. The night may linger, but the light will not fade, because once God steps in, everything changes. And in the darkest place of your life, you will hear what Paul and Silas heard in the dead of night, the sound of freedom rising. Part 3. Grace that breaks every chain. There is a kind of power that doesn't come with thunder or lightning, but with a whisper. It doesn't crush or command. It comforts and transforms. That power is called grace. And grace, real, divine, life-changing grace, doesn't just forgive what we've done. It frees who we are. It reaches into the darkest corners of our prisons and turns them into holy ground. It doesn't ask us to clean ourselves before coming near. It comes near to make us clean. For so long we've been taught that freedom comes through strength, through striving, through trying harder to be better. We build our lives like ladders, hoping that if we climb high enough, pray long enough, give enough, change enough, maybe we'll finally reach God. But grace flips that ladder upside down. It tells us that we don't climb to reach him. He came down to reach us. Grace is not a reward for the faithful. It's the rescue of the fallen. Grace doesn't arrive in glory. It often enters quietly, like light slipping through cracks in a dungeon wall. It finds you where you least expect it, in the moment you break, the moment you fail again, the moment you whisper, "God, I can't do this anymore." That's where grace lives, in the end of yourself. Because grace begins where your strength ends. Many people mistake grace for leniency, as if it simply turns a blind eye to sin. But grace is not weak. It's stronger than any sin, deeper than any shame, louder than any accusation. Grace doesn't excuse your past. It redeems it. It doesn't erase your scars. It anoints them, transforming them into testimonies of mercy. Grace is not the permission to remain broken. It's the power to be made whole. When grace enters, it doesn't negotiate with your chains. It breaks them. It doesn't ask fear to move aside. It casts it out. It doesn't patch up what's dying. It resurrects what was lost. Grace doesn't rebuild the same old you. It creates someone new. That's why Scripture says, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has gone. The new has come. Think about that for a moment. Grace doesn't reform you. It recreates you. It takes ashes and makes them something beautiful. It takes a life bound by failure and turns it into a vessel of freedom. Grace isn't a soft blanket for guilt. It's a sword that cuts through every lie that's ever told you. You'll never change. The truth is, the chains we carry are not as strong as they seem. Their power lies in the lies we believe. The enemy doesn't have to shackle your body when he can imprison your mind. But grace comes to renew the way you see, to rewrite your thoughts with truth, to remind you that you are not what you've done, not what they said, not what you fear. You are what he has spoken over you, forgiven, beloved, free. Grace isn't just what God gives, it's who he is. Every time you feel unworthy and yet still feel his nearness, that's grace. Every time you stumble and still hear him whisper, "Get up," that's grace. Every time you expect judgment but find mercy, that's grace. It is the heartbeat of heaven echoing through the brokenness of earth, a rhythm of love that refuses to stop for you. Some people think grace is easy because it's free, but grace was never cheap. It was bought with blood. Every chain that breaks does so because Jesus bore it first. Every freedom we experience exists because he was once bound in our place. On the cross, he wore the weight of every sin, every shame, every curse, so that you and I could walk away unchained. Grace isn't abstract. It has a face, and his name is Jesus. When he said, "It is finished," he wasn't just speaking about his suffering. He was speaking about your bondage. Every chain, every addiction, every fear that once ruled over you, finished. Every lie that told you you're not enough, finished. Every voice that said God could never use someone like you, finished. Grace is not an idea, it's a victory. And that victory is not just something you read about. It's something you can live. The same grace that saved you is the grace that sustains you. It's the power that lifts you when you fall. The hand that steadies you when you're weak. The light that guides you when you can't see. Grace doesn't only meet you at the cross. It walks with you every step after it. It's not a one-time gift. It's a lifelong companion. There will be days when you still feel the ghost of your chains. When shame whispers, you haven't changed, when fear creeps back in, when the old you tries to reclaim its throne. But grace will meet you there too. It will remind you that freedom is not a feeling, it's a fact. You are free not because you feel free, but because he said you are. The prison may echo, but the door is already open. Sometimes, grace comes gently, like a quiet sunrise after a long night. Other times it comes like a storm, breaking down walls you thought would never fall. But however it comes, it always brings life. It replaces striving with peace, despair with hope, condemnation with love. Grace takes the ugliest part of your story and turns it into the most beautiful part of your testimony. And when you truly taste it, everything changes. You stop trying to earn what's already been given. You stop fearing the God who's been chasing you with mercy. You stop hiding behind shame and start walking in the light. You realize that grace was never about your performance. It was always about His presence. So when the world tells you to fix yourself, remember this: grace already has. When guilt tells you you're too far gone, remember, grace already found you. When fear tells you you'll never be free, remember, grace already broke the chain. Because grace isn't a feeling, a theology, or a season. It's the steady, unrelenting love of God that refuses to let go until you are free. And when that grace fills your soul, the sound of chains falling isn't just something you hear, it's something you become. You become the echo of mercy, the proof of freedom, the living song of a Savior who turned your prison into praise. Because grace doesn't just break every chain, it turns you into a living testimony that no chain was ever stronger than His love. Part 4. Walking in freedom. Freedom, it sounds simple, but it's sacred. It's more than the absence of chains. It's the presence of peace. It's not just stepping out of the prison. It's learning how to live outside of it. Because when the door swings open and the light floods in, we often find ourselves trembling. We've prayed for freedom. We've sung about it. Yet when it finally comes, we realize we don't know how to walk without the weight we've carried for so long. The truth is, sometimes freedom feels unfamiliar. We spent so many years surviving in the darkness that the brightness of grace can almost feel blinding. But freedom, like faith, is something you grow into, one surrendered step at a time. When God sets you free, He doesn't just break the chains and leave you standing in the ruins of your prison. He takes your hand and says, "Now walk with me." And the journey of walking in freedom is not a sprint of strength, but a rhythm of grace. It's waking up every morning and choosing to believe that you are no longer who you were, that the person you once were died with those chains. Freedom isn't about trying to prove you've changed. It's about learning to live from the truth that you already have. At first, you'll stumble. You might still feel the phantom weight of what once bound you. Memories may whisper. Old fears may call your name. But each time you choose to move forward, even when your knees shake, you declare that the past no longer defines you. You learn that true freedom is not about never hearing the echoes of the past. It's about not letting them rule your present. To walk in freedom means to live in awareness, to recognize the subtle ways the enemy tries to pull you back into bondage. He doesn't always come with loud accusations. Sometimes he comes as quiet doubt, a reminder of your failures, a shadow of guilt. But freedom teaches you to recognize his voice and refuse it. You learn to say, "That's not who I am anymore," because freedom is not just a condition, it's an identity. There will be days when you'll feel unworthy, when shame tries to return, wearing a familiar face. On those days, you must remember that freedom is not maintained by perfection, but by presence. You don't stay free by being flawless. You stay free by staying close to the one who freed you. The same God who broke your chains is the one who teaches you how to walk without them. Every time you choose intimacy with him over isolation, every time you choose worship over worry, every time you choose surrender over control, you take another step deeper into freedom. Freedom doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means you no longer walk alone. It means that even when storms rise, your soul remains unshaken because you know where your strength comes from. Freedom is not the absence of battle. It's the assurance of victory. It's the quiet confidence that even if the winds howl, your anchor holds, because the one who set you free is the same one who walks beside you in every season, every valley, every silence. To walk in freedom is to walk in forgiveness. Not only receiving it, but giving it. For nothing will chain your heart faster than unforgiveness. Many of us are freed by God, but remain imprisoned by bitterness. We hold on to what someone did, thinking it protects us. But it only poisons us. Freedom means letting go, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. When you forgive, you are not saying what happened was right. You are simply choosing not to be chained to it anymore. You are choosing to live lighter, to live loved, to live whole. Freedom also means walking in truth. The world will constantly try to rename you. Failure, unworthy, broken, not enough. But you have already been renamed, redeemed, restored, beloved, chosen. To live in freedom is to remember who you are and whose you are. Every morning, grace whispers your true name, and freedom begins again. There will be days when freedom feels like a fight, when temptation knocks, when old habits try to return, when doubt clouds your vision. But even then, grace is stronger. It's in those moments you'll realize that freedom is not a destination you arrive at. It's a daily decision to walk with Jesus. Every step you take with him becomes a declaration. I belong to the one who set me free. And something beautiful begins to happen. The same presence that once broke your chains now becomes the rhythm of your life. Worship flows more naturally. Peace becomes your companion. You start to see that freedom was never meant to be a secret gift, all but a shining testimony, so that others, still bound, might see your life and realize there's a way out too. You begin to understand that freedom is not just for your comfort, it's for his glory. It's not only about what you've been saved from, but what you've been saved for. You are free to love again, to hope again, to serve again, to live without fear. The very chains that once held you become the story that brings hope to someone else, because every link that fell from your soul now reflects the light of the one who set you free. There's a quiet beauty in walking in freedom. Not loud, not boastful, but radiant. It's the peace that stays when the world shakes. It's the joy that flows even through tears. It's the calm assurance that nothing, no sin, no failure, no fear, can separate you from the one who calls you his own. So walk gently, but walk boldly. The ground beneath your feet is no longer the floor of a prison. It's holy ground, the place where grace met your brokenness and gave you wings. You are no longer defined by what you escaped, but by the love that pursued you and called you out. And when the enemy tries to remind you of your past, lift your head and remind him of his future. Remind him that every chain he forged has been shattered by grace. You are not who you were. You are free, gloriously, beautifully, eternally free. Walk in that freedom. Breathe in that grace, and let your life become a living song of gratitude. For whom the Son sets free is free indeed. Part 5. The sound of chains falling. There is a sound that heaven recognizes. The sound of chains falling. It's not loud, not thunderous, yet it echoes across eternity. It's the sound of surrender, the sound of a soul finally letting go, the sound of grace doing what strength never could. Every time a heart whispers, "Lord, I can't, but you can," the heavens lean close to listen, because that is the sound of freedom being born, not through force, but through faith, not through striving, but through surrender. For so long, many of us have learned to live with our chains. You've carried them like they belong to us, polishing them until they blend in with who we are. We've called them my past, my weakness, my nature. But there comes a moment when the soul can no longer bear the weight, when the longing to be free grows louder than the fear of change. That's the moment grace steps in, and something begins to shift. It doesn't always happen with fireworks or lightning. Sometimes it begins quietly deep inside, like the first crack in a wall that's about to fall. When chains begin to fall, it's rarely dramatic. It's gentle, sacred, almost imperceptible. It happens in tears you can't explain, in peace that makes no sense, in a breath that suddenly feels lighter. It happens when you hear the words, "You are forgiven," and for the first time, you actually believe them. It happens when the weight you've carried for years suddenly feels gone, and you realize that freedom isn't something you have to earn, it's something you receive. That's the beauty of grace. It doesn't just break the chains, it silences the lies that kept them locked. Because the truth is, every chain begins in the mind. Before our hands are bound, our hearts believe a lie, that we're unworthy, unlovable, irredeemable. But the moment truth enters, the moment you believe what God says about you, the chain loses its strength. Lies cannot live where light has entered. The sound of chains falling is the sound of truth replacing lies. It's the sound of guilt giving way to grace, of fear bowing to love, of shame dissolving in mercy. It's not the sound of noise, it's the sound of stillness. The soul that once trembled now rests. The voice that once wept now worships. And where once there was heaviness, now there is peace. You may not always hear the sound with your ears, but heaven does. Every time you choose forgiveness over bitterness, a chain falls. Every time you choose faith over fear, a chain falls. Every time you choose to believe you are loved, not because you earned it, but because He chose you, another chain falls. And heaven celebrates, because each falling chain is another victory for grace. When the chains fall, something else happens too. The prisoner becomes the worshipper. The one who once sat in silence now sings. The heart that once felt unworthy now becomes an altar of praise. Because true freedom always finds its voice. The woman who once hid in shame now speaks with compassion. The man who once felt broken now carries hope. The soul that once feared the dark now shines with the light it has found. That's what grace does. It doesn't just set you free. It turns your freedom into a song. There's a passage in Psalm 40 that says, "He lifted me out of the pit of despair. He set my feet on solid ground and gave me a new song to sing." That's the sound of chains falling. It's not just about leaving the pit. It's about learning to sing on the mountain. It's not just about being rescued. It's about being restored. Freedom isn't just about what you walk away from. It's about what you walk into. When the chains fall, you walk into purpose. You begin to see that your scars are not your shame. They're your story. You realize that what once broke you is now what God uses to heal others. The very prison that once confined you becomes the platform for your testimony. Because God wastes nothing, not a tear, not a wound, not even the years spent in chains. Every sound of breaking metal becomes a melody in His symphony of redemption. And then something even deeper happens. You begin to love the sound of chains falling, not only yours but others. You start praying for it, believing for it, fighting for it. You start seeing people differently, not as broken, but as beloved, not as failures, but as captives whom grace is already reaching for. You become part of heaven's rescue mission. Your story becomes an invitation. If He freed me, He can free you too. The sound of chains falling becomes the rhythm of revival. It's not found in grand cathedrals or loud crowds, but in quiet hearts that say yes to grace. It's the mother forgiving herself. It's the son returning home. It's the addict finding hope again. It's the weary finding rest. It's the sinner realizing that grace was never out of reach. Maybe right now, as you read this, you can almost hear it, faintly, somewhere deep in your soul. The soft clink of something breaking loose. The gentle echo of release. That's not your imagination. That's the sound of grace at work. The sound of chains that have clung to you for years beginning to fall one by one. Don't rush it. Don't fear it. Just let it happen. Let God finish what He started. The same hands that broke your chains are the hands that will lead you forward. Every sound of falling iron is an invitation to trust more, to rest deeper, to believe stronger. And when you finally realize that you are no longer bound, when you look back and see the chains lying shattered at your feet, lift your head, lift your hands, and let gratitude pour out like a river. Because the sound of chains falling is not just the sound of your freedom, it's the sound of His victory. And heaven rejoices, whispering the words your heart has longed to hear. The chains are gone. You are free. Forever free. Part 6. Free indeed. There comes a sacred moment when the soul finally exhales, when the weight you once carried fades away, and only the gentle light of grace remains. That is the moment of true freedom. The chains have fallen. The door has opened, and you stand there, trembling, not out of fear, but out of awe, because it's real. You are free, fully, completely, eternally free. Freedom in God isn't just the end of captivity. It's the beginning of a new life. It's not only the silence after the storm, but the song that rises with the dawn. You begin to see that every tear, every wound, every dark night was the soil where grace was planted. What once broke you has now become the evidence of His love. Freedom changes the way you breathe. You wake without the shadow of yesterday. You walk without the weight of shame. You no longer live as a prisoner trying to escape, but as a child coming home, because in the Father's arms, freedom isn't just a feeling, it's your new identity. At times, the echoes of the past may try to return, but now you know you are no longer defined by what once bound you. The voice of grace is louder than every accusation. You no longer fight for victory. You live from it. The cross isn't behind you. It's within you, a living reminder that every debt is paid, every chain is broken. Now you see the world through new eyes. You find beauty in the ashes, peace in the storm. You love deeper, forgive quicker, and hope stronger. You no longer live to prove your worth. You live because you are already loved and chosen. In Christ, you are not just freed, you are reborn. Freedom is not the end of the story, but the beginning of your mission. God didn't just lead you out of your chains. He's sending you into the world carrying the sound of freedom, to speak hope into despair, to bring light into darkness, to become living proof that no chain is stronger than His love. So sing your song, the one born from fire and tears, the song only a soul set free can sing. Live it with joy, with gratitude, with courage. Let every breath declare that the one who began the work in you has finished it. And let this truth echo in your heart forever. You were not made to live in fear or shame. You were created to walk in light, to dance in grace, to live in love. The chains have fallen. The prison is empty. Your heart, redeemed, renewed, and radiant, belongs fully to Him. Whom the Son sets free is free indeed.